Welcome everybody. You're all being let into today's webinar on wildlife sensitive lighting. So great to have you with us. My name is Christy Spire. I'm the team leader of our Nature Stewards team here at Green Adelaide. And as always, love coming to you on an afternoon, evening before you're heading home. I'd like to start as we always do, and is the good and right thing to do, with an acknowledgement of country, even though I'm 4 stories above it. Yadlu Tampanthi, Yadlu Ghana, Yatanga Imparenti, and that translates to we acknowledge that we're meeting on Ghana country today, and we acknowledge and respect the connection that Ghana people hold with not only the land but their waters, their skies and their communities, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. And I know that many of you online have the privilege of working with our Ghana communities across Adelaide, and it's a real privilege and honour that we get to do that. This is our first instalment of our seminar series for 2026, which we have been running now. We're going into our 3rd year, which is exciting, to help really share the great work happening right across Adelaide to help it to be cooler, greener, wilder and more climate resilient. And you're all contributing to that, so thank you. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Green Adelaide YouTube channel, along with all of our past presentations as well. So if you haven't had an explore, really encourage you to do that. So today, as that first slide outlined, we're joined by Dr. Sharon Pittman and Michael Pavlovich, and we're exploring the topic of wildlife sensitive lighting. As our cities and suburbs are growing brighter, the natural darkness that wildlife depends on is quietly disappearing. Light pollution is now a global and growing ecological threat, affecting how animals feed, breed, migrate and survive. Yet it's sometimes many of us rarely think about it in our homes, streets and public spaces. So we're fortunate to be joined by these 2 speakers today who have been thinking about it a lot. Dr. Sharon Pittman from Green Adelaide and Michael Pavlovich, who's the energy and lighting specialist from the City of Salisbury, apologies, who bring deep expertise in urban greening, ecological literacy and sustainable lighting design. And so together today, they'll help us rethink the way we light the night and how small changes can actually make a meaningful difference. So we're going to jump into some of the research with Sharon to start with, and then Michael's going to share an awesome local case study from the City of Salisbury. And just a reminder that you're invited to ask questions at any time by putting them into the chat function within Teams, and we will endeavour to answer as many of them at the end of the presentation and the case study today. So please question away. So I'll invite Sharon to jump in. I'll stop sharing and invite you to share your presentation and take us on this research journey. Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Christy. Well, look, I'm really delighted to be here today and talk to you about a subject that's very close to my heart. Other titles for this presentation could have been Light Pollution and the Disappearance of the Night, or How We've Turned Night into Day and What This Means for Wildlife. Anyway, I thought we'd begin with some context. So I have pressed the button and I might press it again. There we go. So narratives surrounding light and dark are powerful reflections of cultural values and knowledge systems. Indigenous cultures often emphasise the importance of the land-sky connection, or the land-sea-sky connection, with dark skies being quite an important library for Indigenous knowledge systems. Eastern perspectives tend to emphasise that both light and dark are necessary as they're deeply entwined. Many cultures around the world deeply integrate the night sky into cosmology, mythology, governance and everyday life. In Australia, the stars and the moon have long been used for navigation, for food economics, and for predicting weather and seasons. However, since the time of the Enlightenment, around about the 18th century, Western perspectives have tended to associate light with truth, knowledge, goodness, and wisdom. And darkness is related to danger, ignorance, fear, and evil. And so rather than being embraced, darkness in Western culture is often thought of as something to be banished with light. And we weave this preference for light through literature, music and art, religions, and indeed our places. Now, I do suspect there's a biological reason feeding into this related to us being a diurnal species, because we're adapted to be active in the day and sleep at night. Now, sight is adjusted to light rather than dark. Yet sometimes darkness is acknowledged as beautiful in its own right. But regardless, it's a rather complex problem that we have right now. So what is light pollution? It's the presence of unwanted, unnecessary, excessive, or misdirected artificial light at night. And it's often prevalent in urban areas. Another definition is the alteration of natural lighting levels caused by anthropogenic sources of light. And some people call it ALAN, artificial light at night, but I do prefer not to use this term because some folks might not appreciate it. But when we look at satellite images of the Earth at night, we see an incredible quantity of light coming from cities, towns, and settlements. It can even be very visible when we fly over a city and look down from an aircraft at night. So in a very short time, relative to evolutionary timescales, we've transformed the nighttime environment of substantial proportions of the Earth's surface, to the point that 80% of the world's population now lives beneath light-polluted skies. And in the US and Europe, it's about 99%. In Australia, it's about 85%. And many of the world's children are growing up never even seeing the Milky Way. Light pollution is increasing by not far off 10% each year. The consequence is that now we're experiencing a worldwide disappearance of the night sky. And it's something that many of us, as Christy said, have never thought about. It's crept up on us silently. And it's more than our view of the stars that's being lost. Like any form of pollution, light pollution has negative impacts on the world around us. If our cities and urban landscapes are not dazzling with light, the power must have failed, right? Lighting technologies have advanced rapidly, and the introduction of solid-state lighting, or SSL, is relatively recent. And this differs from our earlier technologies that used electric currents in tubes of gases like high-pressure sodium, mercury vapour, or metal halide, and they emitted warmer light colours. The most common kind of SSL technology is the white light-emitting diode, or LED. While much more energy efficient, it has changed the colour of artificial light at night because it emits a much more short wavelength blue light than other technologies. And this makes it colder and brighter. So this translation to SSL has caused a shift, not only in colour, but also in the intensity of light, which extends the impact much further into adjacent ecologically sensitive areas. As artificial illumination and street lighting has evolved, we have reframed the night as an extension of the day in very many places. So the idea about getting rid of darkness and brightening the night is often linked with making the night more beautiful and safe. But the question is, for who and what? So what does it matter? In a nutshell, artificial light at night does a few things. It reduces the visibility of stars and planets, and therefore it impacts astronomy, stargazing, and cultural connection to the night skies. Secondly, it wastes energy, generates heat, and contributes to climate change. Thirdly, it wastes money due to wasting energy. Fourth, it damages human health. Exposure to artificial light at night is known to harm our health. There's a lot of research being done in this area, but short wavelength blue light hinders the body's ability to produce melatonin. And this is linked to increased risks for sleep and neurological disorders. and related to these, a range of health issues, including obesity, anxiety, depression, diabetes, and even some cancers. But fifthly, light pollution damages ecological health. Around the world, many sensitive nocturnal habitats and ecosystems are being lost to light pollution. It affects several functions and behaviours, including physiology and development, predation, feeding, mating and reproduction, wayfinding and migration. It can also change the hormone levels of animals and the numbers and the health of offspring. So the critical issue here is that artificial light at night alters the natural cycles of day and night, light and dark, including daily, lunar and seasonal cycles, which regulate various processes in living organisms. So our planet has evolved over billions of years with light and dark, and there's a whole world of activity that requires and depends upon the cover of darkness. As mentioned, the main culprit is shortwave blue light, as in cool or cold white light. And this is what intensifies the negative health impacts associated with light pollution, true for both humans and nocturnal wildlife, including aquatic ecosystems. And something that's often not realised, it can reduce human safety due to excessive glare, because lights that are too bright actually reduce our ability to see. And studies show that less intense, warmer light is much better for visibility. And this issue comes up really regularly. People assume that the brighter the light, the safer we are from danger and crime. But this actually does not prove to be true. So the components of light pollution, they're pretty simple. Glare, that's that excessive brightness that causes visual discomfort that we've all experienced. Sky glow, the haze of light over cities at night, which reaches well beyond urban areas in many cases. Light trespass is light falling where it's not intended or needed. And clutter, the confusing and excessive groupings of light sources. Often you'll find them in commercial zones and commercial areas. So of these, light trespass presents interesting challenges. It's common for light to spill into gardens, trees and shrubs, ground level ecosystems, wetlands, creeks, rivers, coastal shallows, and into houses and bedrooms. And that's actually where we get a lot of the complaints from, the light spilling into bedrooms. Cloud cover tends to exacerbate the issue, reflects light back down to ground. So reflective surfaces indeed can be significant contributors to the extent of light pollution. This image illustrates the Bortle scale. Now, this is often used to measure the impact of light pollution on dark skies at any given location. It shows from left to right the increase in the number of stars and night sky objects visible in excellent dark sky conditions compared with cities. And the Bortle scale was created by John E. Bortle, an American amateur astronomer, to quantify the darkness of the night sky. This is regularly used as a measurement. So the colour of light, as mentioned earlier, is important. All light has a colour temperature that is measured in Kelvin or K. Colour temperatures range from warm white light with a low Kelvin value such as 2700 to daylight white light with a high Kelvin value such as about 6500. The higher the colour temperature, the brighter the light. For human health and wildlife health, it's recommended that our lights should measure no more than 3000 K in order to minimise the amount of blue light. However, most of our street lights and other lighting measure much higher than 3000 K and are thus much whiter and brighter than is often necessary. This figure is from the national guidelines, National Light Pollution Guidelines for Wildlife, which I'll mention in a minute. So different animals respond to different colour spectrums. And for most, but not all, it works out that warm or amber light is the safest. Sensitivity to high energy, short wavelength, UV, violet, blue light is common in wildlife. This light is strongly detected under scotopic or dark adapted vision, particularly in nocturnal species. Short wavelength light at the blue end of the spectrum has higher energy than longer wavelength light at the red end of the spectrum, which relates to its potential for damage to photoreceptors in the eye. And that's why often if you go for a night walk, for example, you might be asked to put a red cellophane on the end of your torch so that you don't interfere with the night vision and the photoreceptors of the wildlife. So it's a particular photoreceptor cell in the retina of the mammalian eye, which is involved in the regulation of melatonin and in synchronizing circadian rhythms to the 24-hour light-dark cycle. These are the cells that are particularly sensitive to blue light. Melatonin is a hormone found in plants, animals, and microbes, and changes in melatonin production can affect daily behaviours such as waking time, foraging behaviour and food intake, and also seasonal cues such as the timing of reproduction, causing offspring to be born during non-optimal environmental conditions. So artificial light at night exposure affects almost every species studied by scientists. It interferes with the biology and it changes interactions with their environment. It affects whole ecosystems and decreases resilience in the face of environmental change. It's light that regulates biological rhythms with rising and setting of the sun and the phases of the moon, setting light levels and duration of light exposure. These natural light sources establish cues that tell species when to engage in certain behaviours like finding food and mates. Some rely on very dim sources of light, such as starlight, for orientation and navigation. Artificial light at night alters these natural cycles by changing the colour, the intensity, and the timing of natural light characteristics. Effects have been observed among birds, fish, mammals, insects, reptiles, amphibians, insects and other invertebrates, molluscs, plankton, microorganisms and plants. So that's some indication of the kind of research that is happening as we speak. And just some examples of these ecological impacts. Navigation is a big one. The ability of migratory birds to undertake long distance navigation, critical to their life cycles, is compromised by artificial light. They can become disoriented and never reach their destinations. Positive phototaxis, attraction to light, leads to many collisions with brightly lit infrastructure on land and sea. Now, another one that's very famous is that hatchling marine turtles rely on the natural glow of the horizon to guide them towards the safety of the sea. We might not necessarily have them here, but the Sunshine Coast Council, I know, is doing a lot of work in this area and finding the right lights for their coastal locations. So when beaches and coastal towns are brightly lit, baby turtles are drawn off course. They can't find their way to the ocean. Small animals like microbats, possums, bandicoots and wallabies will avoid living in habitat that is artificially lit. And if there is no alternative dark habitat, they will reduce their feeding and their reproductive activity. Finding food is often impacted. Marbled geckos, for example, will not feed in the presence of any light. For southern boorbooks, artificial light disrupts their nocturnal hunting, hinders the foraging for insects, alters their hormonal cycles, confuses their navigation and makes them prone to collisions. There are general impacts on predator-prey relationships, the time at which certain animals emerge from hiding places, reproduction, communication, and the sequencing of seasonal events in plants. There's also evidence of weakened immune systems in some organisms. In Australia, most of our mammals and frogs and many bird and reptile species are nocturnal, or active at night. They've adapted to the natural darkness of the night, and it makes sense because, among other things, it helps them avoid the heat of the day and minimise water loss. And then, of course, there's the fatal attraction for insects. I'm sure we've all seen moths cluster around artificial light sources, unable to leave and become exhausted. Moths use the moon and the stars as navigational cues, and artificial lights such as street lights, porch lights and lamps mimic the brightness of the sky, and this confuses their natural navigation systems. While some insect species retreat from street lights, others are attracted to the shortwave light of bright lamps and LEDs. They'll perch beneath, circle, trapped until exhaustion overtakes them. And in Germany, researchers estimated this to result in 100 billion insect deaths per summer. It's estimated also that a third of insects attracted to artificial light die from collisions, burn injuries, exhaustion, and predation. In some places, finding countless dead insects at the base of urban lights is a common scene. And I've seen that many times myself over my whole life. Maybe not so much lately. There seems to be a few less insects. But this fatal attraction is considered a significant factor in the global decline in insect populations. It's estimated that 40% of insects will go extinct within the next few decades, with artificial light at night often an overlooked culprit. And the effects of artificial light at night are also seen in the marine environment, including oceans, to considerable depths. We know that about 22% of coastal regions around the world are exposed to artificial light at night, and the light from cities is sufficient to elicit biological responses in animals on the seafloor. And this is not only an issue with coastal lighting, it includes rigs and ships. Artificial light can disrupt natural camouflage and nocturnal behaviour, lead to increased predation on seafloor communities such as barnacles, sponges and bivalves, prevent eggs from hatching by masking natural darkness, increase stress and alter sleep-wake cycles. Sea cucumbers are an example. Light causes them stress, inhibits growth and triggers spawning. The light cues are essential for reproduction in sea cucumbers, and natural spawning events are meant to align with lunar cycles. So there are still many knowledge gaps, but there's a great deal of research currently taking place into sandy beaches, rocky zones, intertidal zones, coral reefs, seafloor habitats, and more. So there's no debate that we need light at night. The issue is that outdoor lighting is now ubiquitous, cheap and powerful, and with it, the world has grown a lot brighter. But we can have responsible outdoor lighting, which meets the needs of people to see at night, conserves energy, avoids harmful effects on wildlife and people, and protects our night sky. There are 5 simple principles for responsible outdoor lighting, which apply to all of us. Firstly, it should be useful. Natural darkness should be the default, and artificial light only used if needed. It should be targeted, so light spilling upwards contributes directly to sky glow, and light spilling outwards disrupts wildlife, gets into trees, for example, and human sleep. We need low light levels. Consider the intensity of light produced and also the surfaces that it will fall on and reflect from. It should be controlled. Use timers, dimmers and sensors so that we only use light at night when necessary. And then finally, warm coloured light is very important. Remember that most animals, including us, are sensitive to short wavelength light, which creates blue and violet colours. So it's important to use warm coloured light. And aligned to these principles we can all do a few other things. We can all choose fittings and fixtures that are approved by, for example, Dark Sky International, I'll talk about TIC, or Australian Dark Sky Alliance. We can turn off lights that we don't need on, especially outdoors. We can prevent our indoor lights from shining outdoors or into vegetation. We can avoid artificial lights on beaches, creeks, rivers, wetlands, and bushland. And we can learn more about our local species and their requirements so that we're more aware of their needs. So it's quite possible to reduce the impact of light pollution by changing how we use and how we think about light at night, domestically in our own homes, and commercially, industrially, and of course, throughout the community in general. So there are several great resources that can help us with this. First, there's Dark Sky International. This is the organisation that's leading the global movement and coordinating much of the international research. They developed the Dark Sky Principles, and they run a program called Dark Sky Places around the world, which has protected nearly 200,000 square kilometres so far across the globe, with about 250 dark sky places to date, with 7 of those in Australia and actually 3 in South Australia. Dark Sky International has a home outdoors lighting assessment tool, and they also publish an annual State of the Science report, which is really interesting. They also lead International Dark Sky Week. So this is an annual event in April every year during the week of the new moon when the skies are darkest, and it's where people around the world celebrate. People in these dark sky places celebrate dark skies. This year it's April 13 to 20. Each year it's slightly different, but always in April. Then we have the Australian Dark Sky Alliance, our own expert volunteer organisation, working right across the country, and also has a lot of useful resources, such as the ADSA approved lighting, which includes lighting that's approved for wildlife. They also provide links to a list of companies that make or sell approved fixtures. They have a newsletter you can subscribe to, and late last year they conducted a petition about light pollution to the federal government, which gathered 13,000 signatures, with a response from Minister Murray Watt, further noting the need for legislation in regard to light pollution. And in fact, that only came through this morning, the results of that and his response. In 2023, the Australian government released the National Light Pollution Guidelines for Wildlife with a wealth of information. They're a very good read. And last but not least, the Biodiversity Council's Helping Wildlife Through Lighting Choices also has a wealth of information. I put quite a few links on this screen, but we'll provide those in a follow-up email later, so don't need to write them all down. They will be provided. This is the Australian Dark Sky Alliance approved lighting guide. I just thought I'd show you that it is on their website, so you can see that there's quite a bit of information on lighting that is approved for a wide range of uses. Hopefully that is useful. So we actually have the knowledge. We have the knowledge where the research is being done all the time. It's accumulating rapidly to change how we think about and use light at night. Really, now we just need to get on with it. And I'd just like to finish with a couple of my favourite quotes. Wendell Berry, a favourite. He's actually an American novelist and poet, born in 1934. I love what he's written there. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is travelled by dark feet and dark wings. And then Bill Watterson is the American cartoonist. Light pollution deceitfully robs us of one key gift we were given when we started living on this planet Earth, the ability to look up and wonder where we came from. So that's all from me, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sharon. What a wonderful, packed full presentation of not only poetry, but all of the scientific research all in one spot for people to really start exploring. Thank you so much. And over to Michael with a local example to kind of take us into, the nitty-gritty and what it's like to actually apply some of those principles in practice. Thanks so much, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to talk today. And I see a lot of people online, so thank you all for your interest. It's hard to follow you, Sharon. That was a brilliant presentation. Thank you for that. I'll start off with I've got to use a scroll mouse. This is a slide that Tamika Cook showed at a presentation at a conference that she was at in November. And I think, I'm not sure if it was by design, but this one slide certainly encapsulates everything that the City of Salisbury was trying to achieve when we were looking for a light source for our paths. And I'll refer back to this slide as we go along in the presentation. What I'd like to start with is just go through a glossary of terms so that when I start using light speak, then you guys will understand what I mean. So when I refer to watt, it's the measure of light, that's a measure of energy that's needed from a fitting. Lumens is the measurement of light emitted by the fitting. Sharon mentioned Kelvin, or K, it's the temperature of light from warm to cool. And one thing that we keep forgetting about is colour rendering. And colour rendering is our ability to discern colours within that light source. It's considered a lot on the inside of a building, but very rarely considered when we're talking about outdoor lighting. This slide was explained really well by Sharon, and the only thing that I'll point out are those black lines are basically the wavelength of light that the animal will see, and the black dots in there are the sensitive parts of the spectrum. This is artificial light, and as you can see, our mobile screens are daylight at 65,000 Kelvin, and I think most of the theatres, as in operating theatres, are lit to 65,000 Kelvin, and I'm happy with that. I'm quite happy that my doctor gets to see everything that he possibly can when he's working on me, but it's not the sort of light that we want out in our outdoor environment. When we put on night shift mode, we get down to 2700 Kelvin, but as you can see, there's still some blue light that comes through in that. The old HID, so the old technology lamps like the sodiums and the metal halides, there were some amber lights, so the sodium 50 lights that were out there, they were definitely amber lights. And you can see in the amber light screen, I don't know if you can see my mouse there, but you've got a very, very narrow light spectrum in which to see, but no blue light. PC amber just expands that light spectrum a little bit so that we get to see a bit more, and again, no blue light. So this one picture, this is back off of Tamika's thing, that basically points out why we do this. So we had wildlife-friendly HID, so old technology lamps. These were sodium 50 lamps. And if you have a look comparing what was there at the sodium 50 compared to the PC amber, the WEF PC ambers that have gone in. And I will mention WEF because oils ain't oils. You know, not all amber light, PC amber lights were created equally. The WEF PC amber light has got a CRI, a colour rendering of 70, which is quite high, where other PC amber lights only have a colour rendering of around 40. So it's important to make sure that the lights City of Salisbury have chosen to use is the WEF PC amber lights, and that's because of the colour rendering. So if you have a look here at the grass and the planting down here, you can see the colour hasn't been washed away. And I just want to tell you, we made sure that we took these photos with the same phase of the moon at the same time after sunset, so that and the same time of the year, so that we were comparing apples for apples. If you have a look back here at the houses, you can see that the colours of the houses are all washed away, where here they're quite easily seen. And I think this picture demonstrates the dark sky nature of the PC amber, the WEF PC amber luminaires. Here, if you look around the lake, you can actually see the glow from the lamps. When we replaced them with WEF PC amber, we put all the lights in exactly the same positions. So you can see here the reflection of the light, but you can't actually see the light. So you can't see the light sources around the lake. And in the beginning, that caused us a problem, because we had a resident who lived above the lake, and she would ring up and say, none of your lights are working. We'd go out and they were all working fine. And it was purely because she couldn't see the glow from the lights anymore. So we had to explain, look at the ground, and if there's light on the ground, then the light's working. In the beginning, City of Salisbury, we went through an LED upgrade, just like every other council, to save money and to reduce the emissions that the council has. What we did at the City of Salisbury was we modelled our entire city. So we knew what the road width was, we knew what the height of the poles were, the outreach, what luminaire was on it, what bearing it was at. And so we modelled our entire city so that we knew what was out there. We then evaluated it against 3 different luminaire types. It was the 3 that SAPN allow us to use. So we modelled the 17 watt, the 24 watt and the 29 watt. And we basically said, if we were to swap this luminaire with one of the LEDs, would we get a better light outcome or a worse light outcome? If it was worse, go red. If it was better, go green. And as you can see, I've only kept the 24 watt because I don't need this data set anymore. But you can see that most of our city had a better outcome with the 24 watt. Strangely enough, the 29 watt, so it was actually a light with more lumens, more intensity of light, actually had less of an effect on the outcome. So we had a worse outcome with the 29 watt. So the 24 watt that we chose was 3000 Kelvin. We feel that all of our P category streets, that's our residential streets, should be 3000 Kelvin, no higher than that. And whenever we change lights out, we try and find a 3000 Kelvin equivalent. And these are for the pedestrian streets. We treat our reserves differently. So in the beginning, we were lighting our reserves with white light. And as you can see, this is one of our first lights. And even when I walk down the path at night, and I do a lot of walking down of our paths at night, it felt very claustrophobic. The contrast was really high. The white was good, so you could see people on the paths quite easily, but you couldn't see anybody off to the side. The CRI was high because my pupils had constricted because of the white light. I found it very, very claustrophobic walking down those paths. So we come to the first, we had this project that we wanted to light about 2 kilometres of shared use path between Carisbrook and Jenkins Reserve. And it was a convenient transport corridor. It had significant environmental benefits. We had a lot of migratory birds use that path and a lot of nocturnal species. And Craig came up to me, Craig's my team leader, and said, we'd like to do something different on this path. So we went through a few things. We thought, do we paint the path green so that it's like a bike path and you can see that it's different? But we settled on wanting just a visual difference. And then that fell into how we were going to treat lighting. So I put the feelers out with all of the suppliers, and we settled on Buckford's WEF PC Amber to do the lighting for it. We also, at that time, looked at the poles that we put in the ground. We did have solar poles along the path. They were just used for wayfinding. The solar poles have to have a footing, so there has to be concrete in the ground with steel, only because of the sail effect that you get with the panels. I prefer in reserves not to use footings. I don't like putting concrete in the ground. It's hard to get out. Activity areas change, path alignments change, and you need to move. And you either have to abandon the concrete in the ground or spend a lot of money getting it out. So I like direct bury, and these composite fibre poles that we found from Wagner's are non-conductive. They're impervious to the rewater that we use on our reserves, and they have a really good environmental, or a very low environmental impact in the reserves. They're also really lightweight, so when we freight them down from where they're made, we can get more onto a truck. They cost less. They can be manhandled into position, so we don't have to get trucks, cranes, swings, those sorts of things to install it. As I often say, it's all theory until a pole goes in the ground, and WEF approached us because we were using this on such a long path, and asked if we would join them in a study with the University of Melbourne, looking at how wildlife friendly their lights actually are. So we decided to do, we were in contact by the University of Melbourne, and we chose 3 paths. I've got to say, WEF stayed out quite a lot. They were pretty good. They facilitated every time we needed to ask, but there was certainly no influence from WEF. But we decided we would monitor 3 different paths. One path was our control path that had no lighting on it at all. We had a second path which had white light on it, and the third path was this one here with PC Amber. And the outcome from the trial, and remember it was just a pilot trial, just to reinforce, at the end of every lit path where the lighting stopped, we went to the natural environment and we put a check monitor on each of the paths so that we could check back to our control to make sure that this particular path wasn't vastly different. So we had kind of a check control as well. And we found that the white light masked the phases of the moon and the PC Amber did not. So it assured us that it was doing more good than harm. We also put counters. So we put counters at the beginning of the path before we did the project, so that we could see how many people were using the path before it was lit. And then we put counters, we counted the people through the construction, and now for a year afterwards. We found that the increase of use has gone up 5-fold. So we've had quite an increase in use. But one of the good things that we got from it was that we found that there was very little use from about midnight to 4 a.m. And even though our lights are PE cell controlled, so they're just on whenever it's dark, there is certainly a case to be made for our particular path to be able to turn the lights off at midnight and then back on about 4 a.m. And that's probably something we will consider in the future. I just want to go through how I look at reserve lighting. So we've looked at single runs. So single circuit runs are pretty cheap. It's just one wire basically looping in and out of poles. The only problem is, you need more supply points because you're powering more poles than other. We have a lot of three-phase supply, so we tried running 3 phases down and so one phase for every third light. But we found that was really expensive with the copper wire, and we've settled on using a twin lighting circuit. So, basically all of our odd lights are on one circuit, all of our even lights are on another circuit. That way, if we have a failure on one of the circuits, whether it's somebody tampering with it or whether it's just a cable fault somewhere, we only lose half our lights. Not such a big problem on the streets, but because they're all individually wired into the network. But through the reserves, it can be quite dangerous and a safety issue if we lose all the lights. So this is just a way for us to make sure that at least there's some lighting there. The other consideration is, even though I always order my luminaires with a NEMA 7 base, and that's a base that a PE cell will connect to, I always put a master PE cell in the switchboard, and I put shorting caps on the luminaires. So we found that if we had a PE cell on all of the lights that were under trees would come on early, and the lights that were out in the open would come on later. The PE cell just allows us to control and have all our lights come on at the same time. That brings me to the next point, that we use an RTU, so a remote terminal unit, that monitors all of our reserve lighting. So what this does is it basically just comes on with the PE cell, and it looks at the voltage across our lines. And if there's 10, 12 watts, we know that should be 120 watts along that line. If it's not 120 watts, it sends me an email to say there's a light out. And if there's power on during the day, it'll send me an email to say that my PE cell has failed. The other benefit of the RTU unit is if I decide to take the shorting caps out of the luminaires and put smart nodes in, I can control the lights at an individual light level. So that's basically my talk, and I think I did well. I think I got there within my 10 minutes.
You did very well, Michael. Yeah, well done. Getting to the detail as well. Brilliant. Awesome. There are not a huge number of questions in our chat so far. So if you do have a burning question that you've been sitting on, please pop it in the chat there. And yeah, there's lots of interest though in the chat in terms of sharing this presentation and your information with other councils as well. And Michael, on that, are you aware of other councils? You mentioned at the start of your presentation that a lot of councils are moving over to the LED lighting to save money. Are other people doing similar kinds of trials here across Adelaide or interstate as well?
I'm not sure about other trials. I do know that I think our trial is now, I don't know, I think 2 years old. And yes, I reached out to Teresa and said it would be really nice to do it again. The only problem is, the flights from Melbourne kind of ruin the viability of doing it.
You get some local researchers. Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, we were looking at
interested researchers online. Yeah.
She said that she was more than happy to train some people up and we can do it. But it would be really nice to put all of the monitors back in exactly the same spots and just compare 2 years later on, what the data looks like. Have we had an increase, a decrease, what's happened?
And in terms of some of that data, has there? I'm not sure if it was in your presentation there, but just around, has there been any kind of observations and effects on animals? I know you talked about human traffic in terms of an increase on that, but in terms of wildlife, or is that still yet to be kind of tracked in this trial?
Apart from that first thing, we really haven't done any more on wildlife. And I suppose it's like this. This is a long-term asset. So, even if you get it wrong,
Yes.
you don't do anything for the next 25 years. So, it is kind of get it right to begin with, rather than try and change it later on. So it'll probably stay there for 25 years, and we'll find out at the end of it. And it's the same thing with the poles. They supposedly should have a 75-year life. Most of our metal poles are about a 50-year life. I can tell you right now, I will not be here to see the end of life of my poles.
Fair enough. Someone else can deal with that at the other side of things. Sorry, I'm just toggling back and forth between. We've got a Q&A function and a chat function now on Teams, which sometimes I can miss on the topics here. I just want to make sure I capture. Oh yeah, some more questions coming through. These are great. Oh, interesting. Yeah, thanks, Hayley from Landscape SA. Maybe either of you, but could you comment on the difference between like temporary lighting and permanent lighting in some of those very dark areas like the Mallee? There may be a level of habitat by locals, like the local species live there, but how damaging can short-term changes in lighting be? Are you aware of any of that in the research, maybe, Sharon? And will the wildlife return after a construction period, or will their behaviour be kind of permanently altered? I know that you said that there's some research happening. This might not be fully researched yet, but any indications of that kind of behaviour? Yeah.
I'm not actually aware if any research has been done in what happens in the sense of having light and then turning it off. But yes, definitely, if you turn the lights down in an urban area, wildlife will return and be happier. But I don't know what research has been done in terms of short-term
behavioural differences.
Yeah, I do think a couple of I think Campbelltown Council might be doing something in this sphere in terms of wildlife sensitive. I think Adelaide City Council is also thinking a lot about this as well, or starting to. And I know that the council I've been working with, the Yankalilla, District Council of Yankalilla, with Carricklinga as the first dark sky community in Australia, are starting to think about their lighting policy. So councils are starting to pick this up, starting to think about it, but it's still very early days, and trying to find. So Michael's talked about fixtures and luminaires that can be used on trails and things in parks. It's a little more difficult with main streets and those sorts of places, but it's starting to happen. There's just the movement. I think we need to create the demand, to be quite honest.
Yeah, there was another mention of, I think, Alexandrina Council also, looking at wildlife friendly lighting as well, which is great. And in terms of,
I'm pretty sure that Port Adelaide Enfield are doing something down on the foreshore by Semaphore, I believe. And I know I have talked with Campbelltown about the Torrens River. So quite a few are doing it, and I agree. I think because it's a balancing act. I've been here for 10 years, and I think we get about 8,000 lighting requests a year over the 10 years, and out of those 80,000 requests that I've had for lighting, I think there have been 2 for less lighting. All the rest of it have been for more lighting. Now, that doesn't mean I go and put more lighting in. I mean, I showed you the map. Our map shows us what lights are compliant and so forth. I think one of the things that is hard to do is when you do infill lighting, because it's existing lighting, so you're restricted to the poles that's there and the outreach, and and what's in the environment. So, back shields and backspill are things that are difficult to control, which is a lot easier to control when we're doing a design in a greenfield site like this. If there's a house nearby, we'll order a back shield for the light so that you get this real cut off and nothing goes into the neighbour's backyard. In fact, if you come down Cod Street with me, I can show you how the light doesn't even get to the fence, and the pole is only about a metre away from the fence. So back shields, and I did not believe they would work. I thought it was a marketing thing just for my money, and but they do a fantastic job.
Yeah, great to hear. Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, some of the other questions, and back to your point, Sharon, around creating the demand for this is, from people online, is how we can help, state government, other leaders to take action on this topic. I know you mentioned the Dark Sky Alliance. Is that a group that people can become volunteer members of and advocate to their local governments and state governments through that type of collective avenue, or is there some other avenues you would recommend?
Look, I think it'd be very worth connecting with the Australian Dark Sky Alliance, and they're constantly evolving and working up campaigns. For example, this very recent petition to the federal government, but the federal government's also aware, because of their light pollution guidelines for wildlife that were released in 2023. In terms of advocacy, I think it's just a matter of joining these groups and then becoming dark sky advocates, or joining in with whatever campaigns they are running, signing the petitions. We worked as a member of the Karakalinga Dark Sky community. We worked with the Aldinga community because there was some very tall light poles being proposed for the Aldinga surf break, the wave pool, that were going to be 27 metres high and spilling light, well past the pool itself, and very bright as well. So there's ways you can get involved and help educate, help inform, explain things to people, because the thing is, it's not been thought about by a lot of people. Developers wouldn't necessarily know that there's issues. There is no legislation that I'm aware of, Michael, that I don't think there's any rules around this. This is just something that we're having. Yeah,
that was another question. Yeah. Are there any requirements yet for developers to actually adopt this type of lighting for the new residential areas or anything like that, or is it still optional?
I don't think so. There's no legislation I'm aware of.
None that I know of as well, but all lighting approvals have to come through me. So I make sure that they're appropriate. So as I said, we use 3,000 Kelvin on residential areas. So all of our P category designs are 3,000 Kelvin.
Yeah, great.
There's one awesome last thing, Christy.
Yeah, go for it.
One of my main points that I actually forgot to say, and I don't know how I did it, but it's a simple line. Dark sky does not mean dark ground. Dark sky means dark sky, and we still need to light up the ground. We there's no debate about that. But the fear, to me, one of the main challenges that we face is people's fear. They think that you use this lower kind of lighting, warmer coloured lighting, less intense lighting, and they think there's going to be more danger. So it's very important to remind people that dark sky doesn't mean dark ground. It means other things.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good concept to hold on to, and a good one to finish up on, because we've just hit 5 o'clock, and I know that there's a few more questions in the chat. And as we said at the beginning, if we don't get through to them all, we will put them to Michael and Sharon and compile them into an email to send out to everyone that's been a part of today as well. So we will get to your questions. They always come in a flurry at the end, which is fantastic. And huge thank you to Sharon and Michael for pulling together today's session, and there's a lot of interest, and I think we've got a lot of new advocates linked up today. So yes, we'll send that out to you all. Just letting you know as well, our next session in the series is coming up in March on the Wednesday the 25th, and that one's going to be around that H5 avian influenza, the bird flu, what we know, what's coming, and how South Australia is preparing for that. So please share that one with your networks. We'll send more information out about that session, and you can register. And you can listen back to this recording and share this recording with your networks and leadership, as well as the 30 plus previous sessions we've got online as well. So yeah, please take care and may you go and think about the dark sky this evening. Thank you, everybody, and see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See you later.